He laughed, not the kind that comes from humor, but the kind that comes from a man who believes everything on this table already belongs to him. This idea, he smirked, tapping his fingers on the glass table, worth filing under childish failures. I stared at the $55 million contract glowing on the screen. They thought they could push me out, steal my work, and still win. They forgot one thing. I wrote every line of the core code. Within a week, everything would change, and that smile of his would be wiped clean off. My name is Emily Carter, and I've spent the last 6 years building the backbone of Novaris Solutions' most profitable system. 34 years old, single by choice, and married to my code. That's what my colleagues whisper when they think I'm not listening. They're not wrong. While they were playing office politics, I was architecting Atlas Core, the data management platform that landed us contracts worth millions. The conference room on the 20th floor had always been my territory. Every Monday at 9:30 a.m. sharp, I'd present system updates to the board. But that particular morning in November, something was different. Ethan Marlowe sat in my usual spot, his Italian leather shoes propped on the glass table like he owned the place, 27 years old, fresh MBA from Wharton, and newly appointed Director of Strategy, courtesy of his father, our CEO. "Emily," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Glad you could make it." I stood at the opposite end of the table, my laptop containing 3 months of breakthrough work tucked under my arm. The other executives filtered in. Richards from sales, Martinez from operations, even old Thompson from legal. They all avoided my eyes. "I've reviewed your proposal for the Orion Tech bid," Ethan announced, finally gracing me with his attention. His smile reminded me of a shark circling wounded prey. "The one about expanding the quantum decision engine." "It's not just an expansion," I corrected, keeping my voice steady. "It's a complete algorithmic overhaul that would increase processing speed by 300% while reducing server costs by half." He laughed, not a chuckle, not a polite acknowledgement, a full theatrical laugh that echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Redwood Bay. He tapped the printed proposal I'd submitted last week, the one I'd worked 16-hour days to perfect. "This reads like a computer science thesis, not a business solution. Orion Tech doesn't care about your algorithms. Emily, they care about results they can understand. The results are clearly outlined in Section 4. "The results," he interrupted, standing up with practiced boardroom confidence, "are that we're going in a different direction. I've prepared a streamlined approach that speaks their language. Money, timeline, deliverables. Not this." He waved dismissively at my work. "Technical gibberish." Technical gibberish. The words hung in the air like a slap. This was the system I'd built from scratch, the platform that had generated $40 million in revenue last quarter alone. "Furthermore," Ethan continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to despise, "I'll be leading the negotiation team personally. We need closers in that room, not—" He paused, searching for the word. "Back-end supporters." Back-end supporter. After everything I'd created, I was being reduced to IT support. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Martinez suddenly found his coffee cup fascinating. Even Thompson, who'd praised my work just last week, stayed silent. The coup was complete before I'd even walked in. "Of course," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I understand." Ethan's smirk widened. "Great. Just make sure the system's ready for demo next week. We're signing a $55 million contract, and I don't want any technical hiccups." I nodded, gathering my unopened laptop. As I turned to leave, I heard him address the room. "This is how we modernize. People, less time in the weeds, more time closing deals." The door clicked shut behind me, muffling their laughter. In the hallway, I caught my reflection in the polished steel elevator doors. Composed, professional, unreadable. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd simply hand over my life's work and fade into the server room. They had no idea what they'd just started. 3 days after that meeting, I discovered the full extent of their betrayal. I'd stayed late, debugging a minor issue in the server room when I overheard Ethan's voice from the adjacent conference room. The walls in our Redwood Bay office were thin enough that his arrogant tone carried through perfectly. "The presentation deck is ready," he was saying. "Orion Tech loves the simplified approach. No technical jargon, just pure business value." "What about Emily's involvement?" That was Richard's, always the careful one. "What about it?" "She's been reassigned to maintenance. The beauty is, we're using her entire framework, Atlas Core, the quantum decision engine, everything, but packaging it as our new strategic innovation initiative. My initiative." My hands froze over the keyboard. Through the crack under the door, I could see shadows moving, hear papers shuffling. "The contract documentation lists you as the primary architect," someone said. Sounded like Martinez. "Legal already handled that," Ethan replied smoothly. "Emily's name appears nowhere in the client-facing materials. As far as Orion Tech knows, this is all coming from the strategic team, my team." I pulled up my email, searching for any communication about the Orion Tech deal. Nothing. I'd been completely cut out of the loop. But then I accessed the shared drive. A mistake on their part. They'd forgotten to revoke my permissions. There it was, the full proposal for Orion Tech, worth $55 million, built entirely on my Atlas Core platform, my algorithms, my architecture, my 3 years of sleepless nights, all rebranded under Ethan's visionary leadership. The timeline showed the final presentation was scheduled for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. The contract signing would follow immediately if approved. They were moving fast, probably hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late. "Emily's just a code monkey," Ethan continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "She builds what we tell her to build. The real value comes from knowing how to sell it, how to position it. That's what I bring to the table." Code monkey. The words burned into my brain. 6 years at this company, 4 major platforms built from scratch, dozens of innovations that had transformed Novaris from a struggling startup to a major player, reduced to code monkey. "But the quantum decision engine," Thompson's voice piped up. "Surprisingly, that's incredibly complex. What if something goes wrong during the demo?" "That's what Emily's for," Ethan laughed. "She'll be on standby in the server room, making sure everything runs smoothly. She doesn't need to be in the meeting. Honestly, her presence would just confuse the clients with unnecessary technical details." I heard chairs scraping, the meeting wrapping up. I quickly saved the files I needed and slipped out through the back stairwell. In the parking garage, sitting in my beat-up Honda while Ethan's Tesla gleamed 3 spots over, I opened my laptop and really examined what they'd done. They'd been thorough. I'd give them that. Every presentation slide, every technical document, every piece of intellectual property I'd created had been sanitized of my name. But in their arrogance, they'd missed something crucial. The quantum decision engine, the crown jewel of the entire system, wasn't just another module. It was my personal project, developed partly on my own time, using my own resources. I'd been careful about that, maintaining separate development logs, filing the appropriate paperwork with HR. The company had usage rights, yes, but ownership. That was a different story. I pulled up the employment agreement I'd signed 4 years ago. Then the intellectual property clauses. There it was, Section 7.3. Any software developed by employees using personal resources and time, not explicitly commissioned by the company, remains the intellectual property of the developer unless separately negotiated. The quantum engine had never been formally commissioned. I'd built it as a proof of concept, integrated it into Atlas Core on my own initiative. Novaris had been happy to use it, but they'd never bothered with the paperwork to actually acquire it. Why would they? I was just a code monkey, after all. I sat in that parking garage until 3 a.m., planning my next move. They wanted to play corporate games, fine. But they'd forgotten one crucial rule: never underestimate the person who holds the keys to the kingdom. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. The security guard barely looked up from his newspaper as I badged in. Just another workaholic programmer pulling crazy hours. Nothing unusual at Novaris. I had 4 days before the Orion Tech presentation. 4 days to set everything in motion without raising suspicion. The first step was protecting my creation legally. I compiled every piece of documentation about the quantum decision engine's development. Git commits from my personal repository, timestamps showing weekend and evening work, receipts for the cloud servers I'd paid for myself during the prototype phase. By 7:45 a.m., I had everything uploaded to my lawyer's secure server. Jennifer Huang was a specialist in intellectual property law, someone I'd met at a tech conference 2 years ago. I sent her a brief message. Need to register proprietary software as personal intellectual asset. Urgent. Her response came within minutes. Can file today. Need your signature by noon. Perfect. The next step was more delicate. I accessed the Atlas Core production environment and located the quantum engine module. Every company has a kill switch for critical systems, a way to shut things down in case of emergency. But I wasn't building a kill switch. That would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, I was adding something far more elegant, an authentication layer. The beauty was in its simplicity, a single verification checkpoint that would activate only when the system scaled beyond certain parameters. Specifically, the parameters that would be triggered during the Orion Tech demo. The code was clean, commenting it as a security enhancement in the commit logs. To anyone reviewing, it would look like routine hardening of the system. Working early again. I nearly jumped out of my chair. Thompson stood behind me, coffee in hand. Just implementing some security patches, I said, keeping my voice steady. With the big demo coming up, want to make sure everything's bulletproof. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on my screen. Emily, about the meeting the other day. It's fine, I cut him off. Ethan's right. I should focus on what I do best. Thompson looked uncomfortable. For what it's worth. We all know whose work this really is. But you won't say anything. He had the decency to look ashamed before walking away. By 10 a.m., the authentication layer was fully integrated, the beautiful part. It wasn't checking for a password or a key file. It was checking for something much simpler, my personal developer signature, embedded in the original quantum engine code. Without that signature actively validating requests, any operation requiring the quantum engine would return a simple error. Permission denied. Author verification required. I tested it on a sandboxed environment. Worked perfectly. The system would run normally for basic operations, but the moment they tried to demonstrate the advanced features that Orion Tech was paying $55 million for, everything would lock up. At lunch, while Ethan held court in the cafeteria, regaling his team with stories about streamlining innovation, I submitted my time-off request. 5 days of vacation, starting tomorrow. I had over 3 weeks accumulated, and company policy stated that vacation requests under a week could be approved automatically by the system if no critical projects were affected. Since I'd officially been removed from the Orion Tech project, the system approved it instantly. Taking a vacation, Martinez asked, passing by my desk as I packed up some personal items. Just a few days, I said. Figured I should take some time while the strategic team handles the big presentation. He frowned. But what if they need technical support during... I'm sure Ethan has it covered, I said with a smile. After all, he doesn't want any code monkeys confusing the clients. That afternoon, I made one final modification. I added a simple logging mechanism that would email me every time the authentication layer was triggered. Not to my company email. That would be too obvious. To a personal server I'd set up years ago for side projects. By 4 p.m., Jennifer confirmed the registration was complete. The quantum decision engine was now officially registered as my personal intellectual property, with timestamps proving its development predated any implied transfer to Novaris. As I left the office that evening, I passed Ethan in the lobby. He was on the phone, probably sweet-talking Orion Tech executives. Emily, he called out, putting his hand over the phone. Everything's set on your end for Tuesday. Everything's perfect, I said. The system's never been more secure. He gave me a dismissive wave and returned to his call. If only he knew how true that statement was. I drove home to my apartment by the lake. set up my laptop where I could watch the sunset over the water, and connected to my VPN. From here, I could monitor everything while appearing to be completely offline. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. Tuesday arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes Redwood Bay beautiful in late autumn. From my apartment, I watched the sunrise paint the lake gold while my laptop displayed a steady stream of system logs. The Orion Tech presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:45, my monitoring dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. The first error came at exactly 1:52 p.m. Permission denied. Author verification required. Then another and another. My phone started buzzing with texts from the dev team, but I'd set it to Do Not Disturb. On my screen, I pulled up the company Slack through an anonymous browser. The chaos was glorious. DevOps Emergency Channel. Brian K. 1:53 p.m. Systems throwing authentication errors. Anyone else seeing this? Sarah L. 1:53 p.m. Confirmed. Quantum Engine is completely locked. Mike R. 1:54 p.m. The demo starts in 6 minutes. What is happening? I sipped my coffee, watching the panic escalate. Through my VPN, I could see them frantically trying everything, restarting services, rolling back recent changes, even attempting to bypass the authentication layer entirely, but I'd built it too well. The Quantum Engine was the heart of everything impressive about Atlas Core. Without it, they just had a basic database management system that any competent firm could replicate. At 2:05 p.m., Ethan's messages started appearing. Ethan Marlowe, 2:05 p.m. Get this fixed now. Ethan Marlowe, 2:05 p.m. The clients are waiting. Ethan Marlowe, 2:06 p.m. Where is Emily? Someone responded that I was on vacation. The string of expletives that followed would have been amusing if it wasn't so pathetic. I pulled up a secondary connection to peek at the conference room camera feed, a security feature I'd implemented last year that they'd forgotten about. The Orion Tech executive sat stone-faced while Ethan sweated through his suit, gesturing at a screen showing nothing but error messages. His practiced smile was cracking, his silver tongue suddenly useless against the reality of technical failure. By 2:30 p.m., the CTO himself had joined the emergency channel. Marcus Webb. 2:30 p.m. Status update, now, Brian K. 2:31 p.m. There's some kind of authentication layer we've never seen before. It's checking for author verification. Marcus Webb, CTO. 2:31 p.m. Author, what author? Sarah L. 2:32 p.m. Looking at the logs, it's requesting verification from the original developer of the Quantum Engine. Marcus Webb, CTO. 2:32 p.m. That's Emily. Someone call her. My personal phone showed 17 missed calls. I let it go to voicemail. The next hour was a masterclass in corporate panic. They tried everything, brought in external consultants, called Microsoft Enterprise Support as if they could help with proprietary code, even attempted to restore from backups. But the authentication layer wasn't a bug or corruption. It was working exactly as designed. At 3:45 p.m., Jennifer Huang, my lawyer, sent me a text. Novaris Legal. Just called. They're asking about Quantum Engine ownership. I've informed them of your registered IP. They sound distressed. Through the Slack channel, I watched the conversation shift. Legal Thompson, 3:50 p.m. We have a problem. Emily registered the Quantum Engine as personal IP last week. Marcus Webb, CTO, 3:50 p.m. That's impossible. She built it for us. Legal Thompson, 3:51 p.m. She built it on personal time, with personal resources. We never formally acquired the rights. The usage agreement was implied, not documented. Ethan Marlowe, 3:51 p.m. So buy it from her. Legal Thompson, 3:52 p.m. She's not answering her phone. The conference room feed showed the Orion Tech executives packing up. I could read their lips well enough to catch phrases like waste of time and amateur hour. One of them was already on the phone, probably with their legal team, discussing breach of contract implications. By 4 p.m., the full weight of the disaster was sinking in. Not only was the demo a complete failure, but Novartis had essentially admitted to Orion Tech that they didn't actually own the technology they were trying to sell. The $55 million contract wasn't just in jeopardy, it was dead. Then came the message I'd been waiting for. CEO Daniel Marlowe, 4:15 p.m. All senior staff, emergency meeting, boardroom, now. I pulled up the boardroom camera feed just in time to see Ethan being eviscerated by his own father. The older Marlowe's face was purple with rage, while board members sat in uncomfortable silence. Papers were thrown, fingers were pointed, and through it all, Ethan kept looking at his phone, probably hoping I'd miraculously respond and save him. By 5 p.m., Orion Tech had formally withdrawn from negotiations, citing lack of technological ownership transparency and concerns about Novartis's operational competency. The flames were spreading, and I hadn't even played my final card yet. Monday, 7 a.m. Carl Donovan sat alone in the compliance office, the binder open before him like a prophecy. He'd arrived at 5:30, before even the security guards had finished their rounds. The 76 pages had become his obsession, particularly page 76 itself, the one everyone else had ignored. He photographed every page, every clause, every warning I'd meticulously documented. Then he did something brilliant. He searched the company's email archives for any mention of Clause 7.1c. 6 months ago, Diana Brooks from Legal had sent a company-wide memo. New IP protection protocols are now in effect. Please review Section 7.1c for critical system requirements. The email had 43 recipients, including Elliot Crane, who'd responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Carl printed everything: the memo, Elliot's response, the complete audit trail showing when the binder had been filed, who had access, who had been notified. He was building a case, not for court, but for survival. At 8:15, he requested a meeting with Diana Brooks. Urgent compliance violation risk for Operation Horizon. Diana, unlike Elliot, actually read documentation. It was her job to protect the company from liability, and she took it seriously. She arrived at Carl's desk within 10 minutes, her expression shifting from annoyed to alarmed as she read through his evidence. "Are you telling me," she said slowly, "that they're about to deploy 17 IP-sensitive modules without the required authorization?" "In approximately 6 hours," Carl confirmed. "The investor dinner is at 7 tonight. Elliot wants the system live before then." Diana's face went pale. She understood what Carl was showing her. This wasn't just a technical violation, it was a material breach that could void their insurance, trigger SEC investigations, and expose the company to massive lawsuits if anything went wrong. "Who's the original author?" she asked. "Madison Reed. Terminated January 3rd. Diana actually laughed a short, bitter sound. "They fired the only person who could authorize this deployment." Meanwhile, in the war room, Kara was leading the final deploy preparations. The team had stopped questioning anything. They were in pure execution mode, following orders like soldiers marching toward a cliff. At 9:45, Diana Brooks sent an email that would later be known as the memo that killed Operation Horizon. She didn't bury the lead. "Immediate halt required. Operation Horizon deployment violates Compliance Section 7.1c. No IP-sensitive modules may be deployed without original author authorization. Madison Reed's signature is required for 17 critical components. Proceeding without authorization would constitute willful violation of corporate IP protection protocols." She CC'd legal, the CTO, the entire board of directors, and crucially external audit. The email hit like a bomb. Within minutes, Elliot was calling Diana, his voice audible through her office walls. But Diana had done her homework. She had the documentation, the audit trail, the proof that everyone had been notified about the requirements months ago. At 10:30, an emergency meeting was called. The boardroom filled with executives, lawyers, and one very nervous Kara Voss. Carl presented his findings with clinical precision, laying out each violation, each ignored warning, each moment where someone could have stopped this but chose not to. The CTO, Jennifer Walsh, was the first to grasp the full scope. "You're telling me our $91 million initiative depends on modules we can't legally deploy?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Carl replied. Elliot tried to salvage the situation. "Surely we can get retroactive authorization. Where's Madison now?" Diana pulled up my termination paperwork. "You gave her 2 weeks severance and marked her as performance issues. She has no obligation to help us. And considering the circumstances of her departure, no incentive either." The room fell silent. They all knew what Diana wasn't saying. They'd burned that bridge with unnecessary cruelty. "Can we rebuild the modules?" someone suggested. Carl shook his head. "The Atlas Bridge took 18 months to build. Madison understood the legacy systems better than anyone, even with a full team. We're looking at 6 months minimum, and that's assuming we can reverse engineer her logic without documentation." "But we have documentation," Kara protested. "We have her documentation," Carl corrected, "which explicitly states that her logical architecture is proprietary and protected under Section 7.1c. We can't use it without her authorization." The General Counsel, Thomas Wright, had been silent until now. He stood slowly, his face grave. "I need to inform the board that proceeding with deployment would expose the company to significant legal liability. If we deploy and something goes wrong, data breach, system failure, financial losses, we'd be negligent. Our insurance wouldn't cover it. The directors could be held personally liable." That was the killing blow. Personal liability. The two words that make executives' blood run cold. At 11:45, with 5 hours until the investor dinner, Jennifer Walsh made the call. "Operation Horizon is suspended immediately. No deployment, no demonstration, no promises to investors until we resolve the compliance issue." Elliot's face had gone from red to white to gray. His $91 million baby was dead in the water, killed by a single missing signature on page 76 of a binder he'd never bothered to read. But the best part, this was all documented. Every decision, every warning ignored, every moment where Elliot chose speed over compliance. The paper trail led straight back to him, the executive who'd promised impossible timelines and fired the one person who could have delivered them. Thursday morning, I broke my silence. At 8 a.m., 1 hour before the emergency board meeting, I sent a single email to Daniel Marlowe, CCing the entire board of directors. "I'm willing to discuss terms. My office, 2 p.m. today. Bring the board, legal, and a better attitude than your son displayed." By 8:30, Daniel had responded, "We'll be there." I arrived at Novaris at 1:45 p.m., walking through the lobby with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. The receptionist's eyes widened. News of my coup had clearly spread throughout the building. Whispers followed me through the hallways. Some looked at me with admiration, others with fear. Good. Let them wonder what else I was capable of. The boardroom was already full when I entered. Daniel Marlowe sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. Ethan slouched in a corner seat, refusing to meet my eyes. The entire board was present, along with Thompson from legal and even Marcus Webb, the CTO who'd ignored my contributions for years. I didn't sit. Instead, I connected my laptop to the presentation screen. "Gentlemen," I began, "and ladies," nodding to the 2 female board members, "let me show you what you tried to steal." I pulled up the quantum engine's architecture, the real one, not the simplified version Ethan had presented. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through exactly what I'd built, the innovations that set it apart, the competitive advantage it provided, the potential applications beyond what they'd even imagined. "This technology," I concluded, "conservatively represents $100 million in value over the next 3 years. Orion Tech was just the beginning. We're prepared to offer you $2 million for the rights," Daniel said. I shook my head. "I don't want to sell it." The room erupted. Board members started talking over each other until Daniel raised his hand for silence. "Then what do you want?" A partnership. I retain ownership of the quantum engine. Novaris licenses it from me exclusively, and I want 7% of any contract value that utilizes my technology. Ethan finally spoke up, his voice cracking. That's insane. 7% of 55 million is 3.85 million, I finished. For technology you valued at 0 when you cut me out. You're an employee, he spluttered. You can't just... Actually, I can... And if you'd bothered to read my employment agreement instead of assuming I was just another code monkey, you'd have known that. Thompson cleared his throat. Ms. Carter's position is legally sound. The quantum engine is her property. We can either license it or lose it. There's another issue, I continued. Orion Tech. Daniel's jaw tightened. They're threatening to sue. I can fix that. Everyone leaned forward. I've been in contact with their CTO, I lied smoothly. I hadn't, but I would be soon. They're still interested in the technology. They just want to know they're dealing with someone who actually owns it. If you announce me as Chief Technology Architect, with full authority over the project, I can salvage the deal. That's Ethan's project, Daniel said, though his conviction was weakening. Ethan's project failed spectacularly. On Tuesday, he promised them technology he didn't own, using presentations he didn't understand, for a system he can't operate. Do you really want to double down on that strategy? Ethan stood up, face red. This is extortion. No, I said calmly. This is negotiation, something you claim to be so good at. The board members exchanged glances. Finally, Margaret Chen, the longest-serving member, spoke up. Mr. Marlowe, with all due respect to your son, Ms. Carter holds the keys to not just this contract, but our entire competitive advantage. We'd be fools not to accept her terms. One by one, the other board members nodded agreement. Daniel looked like he'd swallowed glass, but business was business. 7% is too high, he said. 5%, plus the Chief Technology Architect position, with a base salary increase of 40%. 6%, the position, 50% salary increase, and Ethan publicly acknowledges my role in developing the technology at the contract signing. Ethan made a strangled sound. Daniel silenced him with a look. You want my son to humiliate himself? I want him to tell the truth. That's only humiliating if he's been lying. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Daniel extended his hand. Deal. I shook it, maintaining eye contact. I'll need the agreements drawn up by tomorrow morning. Once signed, I'll unlock the system and call Orion Tech. As I gathered my laptop, Ethan finally found his voice. You destroyed everything just to prove a point. I paused at the door, looking back at him. No, Ethan, I protected what was mine and demanded fair treatment. The destruction that was all you. The last thing I saw before the door closed was Ethan's face, crumpled in defeat, finally understanding the price of his arrogance. Friday morning arrived with the satisfying weight of signed contracts on my desk. Chief Technology Architect Emily Carter. It had a nice ring to it. By 9 a.m., I'd unlocked the quantum engine and personally called Orion Tech's CTO, Sandra Williams. Ms. Williams, this is Emily Carter from Novaris. I understand there were some concerns about our recent presentation. Concerns? She laughed bitterly. That's diplomatic. Your sales director promised us technology his company didn't even own. Former sales approach, I corrected. I'm now leading this project directly, and I can assure you that all intellectual property issues have been resolved. I own the quantum engine, and Novaris has properly licensed it. We're prepared to demonstrate the full system on Monday, if you're willing. There was a pause. You're the actual developer. Every line of code. Then why weren't you in the original meeting? Internal politics that have since been corrected, comprehensively. She was quiet for a moment. Monday, 10 a.m. If you can deliver what was promised, we'll reconsider. After hanging up, I called an all-hands meeting for 2 p.m. The entire company gathered in the main conference hall, over 200 employees buzzing with rumors and speculation. Daniel Marlowe stood at the podium first. his expression professionally neutral. As you all know, we've had some structural changes this week. I'm pleased to announce that Emily Carter has been promoted to Chief Technology Architect, effective immediately. She'll be leading all strategic technical initiatives, starting with the Orion Tech partnership. The applause was genuine from the engineering team, hesitant from sales and marketing. I stepped up to the microphone. Thank you, Daniel. I know this week has been challenging for everyone. There's been confusion about roles, responsibilities, and ownership. Let me be clear, the quantum engine is back online. Orion Tech is still interested, and we're going to close this deal. But moving forward, we do things differently. No more siloed departments, no more taking credit for others' work. We succeed as a team or not at all. I looked directly at Ethan, who stood against the back wall. And that starts with transparency about who contributes what. The room was dead silent, everyone waiting to see if Ethan would respond. His father had already spoken to him. I knew because I'd insisted on being in the room when it happened. The choice was simple: publicly acknowledge my work or lose his position entirely. Ethan stepped forward, each step looking physically painful. He took the microphone with trembling hands. I owe everyone, especially Emily, an apology. His voice cracked. The technology we've been showcasing, Atlas Core, the quantum engine, was developed by Emily Carter. I attempted to minimize her contribution and maximize my own role. This was wrong, unprofessional, and nearly cost us everything. The room remained silent. This was corporate theater at its finest, and everyone knew it. Emily, he continued, finally meeting my eyes. Your work is brilliant. I let my ego blind me to that. I'm sorry. I nodded once, acknowledging the apology without accepting it. Words were cheap. His public humiliation was just the beginning. Over the weekend, I rebuilt the entire presentation from scratch. No simplification, no dumbing down, just clean, powerful demonstrations of what the system could do. I brought in 3 of my best engineers, the ones Ethan had dismissed as technical support, and we crafted something magnificent. Monday's meeting with Orion Tech was scheduled for their offices across the bay. I arrived at 9:30 a.m. with my team. No salespeople, no executives, just the people who actually understood the technology. Sandra Williams met us in their boardroom, accompanied by her technical team. Ms. Carter, she said, shaking my hand. I have to admit, I'm curious how this situation resolved itself. Simply, the company realized that the person who built the technology should probably be the one presenting it. She smiled. Novel concept. Show us what you've got. For the next 2 hours, we demonstrated every feature, answered every question, and proved beyond doubt that Novaris, through my quantum engine, could deliver everything Orion Tech needed and more. Sandra's team was impressed, asking sophisticated questions that I handled with ease. This is exactly what we were looking for, Sandra said finally. Actually, it's better. The previous presentation made it sound good. You've shown us it actually is good. By 3 p.m., we had a verbal agreement to proceed with the $55 million contract, contingent on one condition. Emily needs to be our point of contact, Sandra insisted. No offense to your sales team, but we want to work with someone who understands what they're selling. Daniel, who joined us for the final negotiations, agreed immediately. Ethan, who'd been required to attend but not permitted to speak, looked like he was choking on his own tongue. The local tech press got wind of the story by Tuesday. Novaris engineer saves 55 $. Deal after management shakeup, read one headline. My phone buzzed with recruiter messages and interview requests, but I wasn't going anywhere, not yet. I had a percentage of every deal using my technology, authority over all technical decisions, and best of all, Ethan Marlowe reporting to me on any project involving the quantum engine. The boy king had been dethroned by the code monkey he'd dismissed. The contract signing ceremony was scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m., exactly 2 weeks after Ethan had laughed at my idea. Novaris had pulled out all the stops, catered reception, media coverage, even a professional photographer to document what marketing was calling the deal of the decade. The 20th floor gleamed under strategic lighting. Champagne towers sparkled, and executives from both companies mingled in their expensive suits. I stood at the center of it all, wearing the one designer dress I'd splurged on with my signing bonus, watching Ethan fade into the background of his father's empire. Sandra Williams approached me with 2 glasses of champagne. Quite a turnaround from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks can change everything, I replied, accepting the glass. I heard what really happened, she said quietly. How they tried to cut you out. People make mistakes. And you made them pay for it. She clinked her glass against mine. Good for you. Daniel Marlowe stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone. The room fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a historic partnership between Novaris Solutions and Orion Tech. This $55 million contract represents not just a business deal, but a technological leap forward. He continued with corporate platitudes, but I noticed him carefully including my name in every mention of the technology. The legal department had been very clear. Any attempt to minimize my contribution could trigger another ownership dispute. Now, Daniel said, I'd like to invite our Chief Technology Architect, Emily Carter, to say a few words. I walked to the podium, passing Ethan, who stood rigid against the wall. His Harvard MBA and Stanford credentials hadn't saved him from the oldest rule in tech: never underestimate the person who actually knows how things work. Thank you, Daniel, I began, looking out at the crowd. 2 weeks ago, someone told me that my work was just technical gibberish, that real value came from knowing how to package and sell ideas, not create them. I saw Ethan flinch. They were half right. Presentation matters, sales matter, strategy matters, but without genuine innovation, without the people who build the actual solutions, you're just selling smoke. I raised my glass. So here's to everyone who's ever been dismissed as just a programmer, just an engineer, just a back-end supporter. You are the foundation everything else stands on. The engineering team erupted in applause. Even some of the salespeople clapped, though nervously. And I continued, making eye contact with Ethan. Special thanks to those who doubted us. Your skepticism motivated us to prove exactly what we're capable of. I stepped down from the podium to thunderous applause. The contracts were signed, photos were taken, and Orion Tech's check was ceremoniously presented. Throughout it all, I made sure to position myself prominently in every photo, every handshake, every moment that would be preserved in company history. As the reception wound down, Ethan finally approached me. He looked smaller somehow, his designer suit hanging wrong on his diminished frame. You destroyed me, he said quietly. No, I corrected. You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to be collateral damage. My father barely speaks to me. The board wants me gone. My reputation in the industry is ruined. Funny how that happens when you try to steal $55 million worth of someone else's work? He stared at me for a long moment. You planned this from the beginning, from the moment I laughed at your presentation. I took a final sip of champagne, considering my response. Ethan, you had every advantage: your father's position, your Ivy League education, the full support of leadership. All I had was the code I wrote and the patience to wait for you to hang yourself with your own arrogance. So this was revenge. This was justice. Revenge would have been destroying the company. Instead, I saved it. The difference is, now everyone knows who really did the saving. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Ethan? You report to me now on anything involving the quantum engine. I expect status reports every Monday at 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. His face went pale. He'd forgotten that particular clause in the new structure. As I left the building that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Saw the news coverage. So proud of you, sweetheart. I smiled, looking back at the Novaris Tower gleaming in the sunset. 2 weeks ago, they'd laughed at my idea, called it childish failure, tried to steal my life's work. Now I owned 6% of every dollar it generated, held the title of Chief Technology Architect, and had turned their golden boy into my direct report. The code monkey had won, And everyone in Silicon Valley would remember it. The $55 million contract, that was just the beginning. The quantum engine would generate hundreds of millions in the coming years, and I'd be right there, collecting my percentage and making sure no one ever forgot who really built the future. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's succeeding so spectacularly that they have to watch your triumph every single day. And Ethan's smile. Just as I'd promised myself 2 weeks ago, it had been wiped completely clean. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please drop a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on Emily's journey. What would you have done in her position? Let me know in the comments.